episode 3 of the Inside the Paddock podcast. This is Tim here,
Charlie,
Kenji,
and we are going to get into the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which is going to happen this weekend. Qualifying was already this morning, and we have a sprint weekend, so that should be exciting. And we're going to see if Red Bull can keep the dominance that they've been keeping for the first few races. Any of y'all want to get started?
Yeah, it's been a while since our last podcast and since the last race, really, 4 weeks or so. So I'm excited to get into this one.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one. Obviously, Baku is a unique track, and we got upgrades for some teams, so it should be interesting to see what happens this weekend. So do you want to take us over to you got any thoughts on the track, Kenji?
Sorry, what did you say you cut out there?
Sorry. You wanted to do a little part talking about the track? You wondered if you want to take over on that?
Oh, yeah, sure. Right, so first race in 4 weeks, and we're here in Baku, Azerbaijan. And we, like Charlie mentioned, we know how crazy Baku can be just based on the last few races here at Baku. So just to look at the track, we have 2 long straights into turn 1 and turn 3. It's a very power-focused track, and despite that, it's kind of a unique track as well. It's very tight, a lot of tight corners. It's a street circuit, so that kind of feeds into some of the chaos. And touching on that aspect, the drivers haven't raced in 4 weeks, so that could add a bit of more chaos into this. Usually we have Baku after about 2 weeks previously, but since the calendar has changed a lot, we ended up having this 4-week break before Azerbaijan, which will feed into more of that carnage aspect. You guys want to touch on some of the other aspects of the track?
Yeah, I've always thought this was an interesting track. It can be very wide at points. It can be very narrow at points. There's obviously the castle section, which is tricky. So there's a very technical sector 2 kind of in between the long straights. So you kind of have to have a balance of a downforce and engine power, which will it's a unique blend that these teams are going to have to figure out to extract the best out of the car this weekend.
And especially, I think, considering the fact that they're doing some new resurfacing on the track, and especially also with the fact that the race is being held at a different time of the year than it was held previously. So previously, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was held in mid-June. It's usually June 6th, June 12th, sometime around then. So it would be much hotter. And since it's being held at the end of April now, a lot of the data that the teams had from previous years, considering tire wear, engine wear, things like that, is going to be it's not going to be very useful given the different conditions this year. So, yeah.
All right. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a learning curve for the teams. And then with the limited practice sessions with the sprint weekend, there will definitely be some carnage in the sprint or in the race. And we saw so it is a sprint weekend. There's a new sprint format. Personally, I don't really understand what's going on, but I think the grid for the race was set today, correct?
Yep. It was set in the qualifying session today.
Okay, so no longer do you qualify for the sprint, you qualify for the race. So do you want to take us through how you qualify for the sprint, Kenji?
Yeah, so just touching on the 3 aspects or the 3 main aspects of this new sprint format. So there will only be 1 hour of practice on Friday of the weekend. So there won't be any FP2, FP3, none of that, right? Just 1 hour of practice on Friday. Additionally, new thing on Saturday is the sprint qualifying session. It's split into 3 sessions, which is kind of like qualifying regular Saturday qualifying. But the wild card here is that the first session is 12 minutes, the second is 10, and the third is 8. So comparing that with regular qualifying, first session was 18 minutes, the second is 15, and the third is 12. So the teams now have less time to qualify, hence the name sprint qualifying. And in this case, while they still can do like 2 laps of, I guess, qualifying pace, they won't be able to switch tires in between those 2 laps. So there's the wild card there. And the teams will still be awarded based on how they place in the sprint qualifying. So it's kind of like how we had with the sprint races before. You'll get 8 points for placing in first, and going down methodically until you get to 8th place, in which you get whoever places there gets 1 point. So yeah, it's a very strange format, and to be honest, I don't really like it. I think it just makes the sport confusing almost. I get that they're trying to experiment and bring new things in, but I'm not sure if this is the correct direction. What do you guys think?
Wait, so there is no sprint race? Like it's just qualifying?
I think we only have sprint qualifying in these new sprint weekends. There's no sprint races, anything like that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and the weird rule is for Q1 you have to use the medium tire. For Q2 you have to use the medium tire as well. And for Q3 you have to have a new set of soft tires. And if you don't, you can't partake in any of those sessions.
Okay.
So it's really weird. Like with Tsunoda, he used all of his soft tires, which means he won't be able to run in Q3 tomorrow in the sprint qualifying.
Huh. Okay. I was about to say that I liked it more than last year's sprint until I learned there wasn't a race. So I don't really know what to think about this. I do like that the Friday qualifying now is set for the race, which I think was a reason that made kind of the sprints or the races last year after a sprint less interesting, because there was less like mixture on the grid because they had the sprint to kind of even each other out. But I don't know what to think. I guess we'll see how it goes over the course of the year. But
yeah, to be honest, I just don't see the point though. That's the thing. Like, why can't we just run regular, 2 practice sessions on Friday, 1 on Saturday, and then we have qualifying on Saturday, and then obviously the race on Sunday. Like, why can't we do that? Because look at it just creates more makes the sport harder to understand. So it makes it less, open to new fans who want to get into the sport. And it even the point was to make sprint, qualifying sprint races actually relevant, because before we saw with sprint races, teams weren't really willing to go for risk because the main part of the points is scored on Sunday. But the problem is they're not fixing the problem still, because all of the points are still scored on Sunday. So I don't get the point of why they had to make this change. It just seems ridiculous almost.
yeah,
But yeah, we'll see.
No, I really don't understand it. If there's no race, for the fans, I've never been to a race, but I assume it's not extremely simple to follow along with the qualifying results when you're at the track. So I don't really understand how this would be a benefit to a live viewer, or really to a TV viewer. I don't know. It really doesn't make any sense to me. I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, but I agree with you that it just seems unnecessary.
Yeah, it does. I do appreciate the fact that they're trying new things though. The concept of an 8-minute qualifying session will be really interesting to see tomorrow. So I appreciate the fact that they're changing things up a bit, but ultimately I don't know if this is the right direction for the sport as a whole. But yeah, we'll just see. I know I keep saying that, but yeah.
All right. Moving on from that, uh, we got qualifying from today. So I think, Tim, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think we talked about Baku being just like a very chaotic track, and we saw a lot of that this morning. We had Russell not even make Q3. We had a very disappointing Alpine performance as well, but then we saw teams like McLaren make it into Q3. I think Norris had P8 and Piastri in P10. But we can also there were quite a few shunts into the wall. We had De Vries, and then I believe Gasly also ran into the wall. I don't know if that has to do with the fact that there was only 1 hour of practice, which I don't know if that's a good thing because of how just the track at Azerbaijan is, and how like technical you have to be, or how like there isn't really room for error. So at least in that aspect, I don't think that it's good to put the drivers into this with only 1 hour of practice. But I think that it was still interesting. I mean, we saw a non-Red Bull pole for the first time this season. Hopefully Leclerc can kind of carry that on through the rest of the race weekend. Hopefully Ferrari doesn't kind of screw him over with their strategy again. But I don't know. It was a very interesting qualifying to watch.
Yeah.
I was really impressed. Sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
No, you go ahead.
Yes. So I was just really impressed with McLaren, placing in 7th and 10th in the qualifying today. We saw how bad the start of their season was, and just to see it get back on the pace was good to see.
Yeah, McLaren was definitely encouraging, especially with this car performance we have here. It says that McLaren is the worst team on the straights, and in a track that at least partially is long straights. That's definitely really encouraging for their progress this season. And what was not encouraging was Alpine. After they completely bottled it at Melbourne, they didn't look good in Baku, which I'm not necessarily complaining about, but it was just kind of like they are not executing very well right now. I wonder if we know that their drivers aren't the biggest of friends, and maybe that'll come and start rehashing some of that with continued disappointment.
Yeah, just touching back on the performance of each car. McLaren has I think they've gone with a setup that's really downforce focused, and that's why they've had such great pace in the corners, especially the slow speed corners. And for qualifying, I think that's a good thing. But in the race, when you can overtake and do all of that other stuff with the DRS, I think that's going to hurt them. And I think that goes with Ferrari as well, because the fact that they don't have as much pace on the straights will make it really easy for other cars to pick them off. But we'll get onto that a bit later on in the podcast, I guess.
Could maybe this strategy be because of this new like sprint format? Because there is it's technically like 2 qualifying sessions, and in one you can get points, if I'm not wrong, right? That's how it works?
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I think that teams should still be focusing for Sunday, the race, because there's 25 points to be had on Sunday and 8 to be had on Saturday. So the focus should be on Sunday and not Saturday, right?
Yeah, I think it's just the Mercedes engine in general hasn't been great in the last 2 years, and I feel like that kind of was a trend last year that McLaren and Norris especially would get high up in qualifying and then just kind of sit. Couldn't challenge the Mercedes, but wasn't really at risk of getting passed by anyone else. So he just kind of sat there in the best of the rest without passing anyone, and maybe that's accredited to the downforce focus setup. So maybe if they can develop a way to get some more power, they could move up the table this year.
I think just going down. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was just gonna mention. I think that just going down the order with AlphaTauri, I don't know what's going on with De Vries, but he's had an absolute shocker to have these past few races. And Tsunoda, on the other hand, is having amazing performances. Like today, I think he placed in eighth, or yes, eighth. So I hope De Vries figures it out because we know how great he can be, especially in places like Formula E. And to see him struggle so much is a bit disappointing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think someone talked about in an earlier episode about how his whole like financial issue might jeopardize his seat. But I mean, if he keeps driving how he is, I don't see him being in F1 like long at all. Which I wouldn't like him to kind of just be a one and done driver because I like him. But I don't see any other way this is going to turn out.
Yeah, he. I know a lot of people were thinking that De Vries was going to come in and Tsunoda is going to have a tough time competing with him, and Tsunoda is going to be in danger of losing a spot with the inconsistency he's been showing the last few years. But I think that Tsunoda has been phenomenal so far, and De Vries has not looked very good. And Tsunoda is kind of, I mean, he's looked really good. He might be even driving himself into like potential Red Bull second driver and a little down the road maybe.
Yeah, and then we've got the AlphaTauri. We have Williams kind of bottom of the order again. Actually, no. They both got into Q2, which I'm happy about. We had Albon in P13 and Sargent in 15, beating out both the Haas and Zhou. And then we had Pierre and De Vries, who both crashed out in 19th and 20th. So I'm happy with how Williams is doing. I mean, they're always, at least the past few years, they're expected to be bottom of the order, but it looks like they're making some progress. I guess if we look at the car performance, they're not too far off the top teams in the straights, I guess, in comparison to like McLaren and Alfa Romeo. So some other bottom feeder teams. But they're definitely not the worst car this year, which I'm happy about.
And talking about Williams, the driver that I'm really happy about is Albon. And I've been a really big fan of Albon ever since he was at Red Bull. And to see him have a lot of success with Williams is good to see, especially with Australia. I know he crashed out in Australia, and yeah, that sucked. But he was running in 6th, I think, before he crashed. And yes, 13 might not be the best, but for Williams, I think it's a really good performance. And yeah, I hope he can continue this, I guess, streak of good performances on as we go through the season.
Yeah, and then I think we're going to talk about Russell. I mean, it happens. Like, I think he just made a mistake, or maybe he just couldn't put the lap together. Unfortunate for him, kind of coming off Australia where he had the DNF, but Hamilton has definitely looked more consistent so far this season.
Yeah, Russell, I think he had a moment on his last flying lap. He had a moment going into the last corner. He got a snap of oversteer, and that caused him to have a horrendous lap. But yeah, with Hamilton in 5th, I think Mercedes, I don't think they're in that bad of a position, especially considering that Baku, if you're going to qualify poorly, Baku is probably one of the best tracks, which you can like overtake. So I'm not really worried that much about Mercedes. I think they have a stronger package here than Aston Martin do.
Yeah, I mean, it was uncharacteristic of Russell because ever since his Williams days, I think his nickname was like Mr. Saturday or something like that because he was always able to push the worst car on the grid. into Q2. I think he might have even gotten it into Q1 a couple times. But I wouldn't be worried about it. I mean, he was only 11th, and he did make a mistake, which caused him to get there. So it's not like it was just him. Like, it's not like it was just him, like, driving bad. I wouldn't be too worried about it.
Yeah. I was looking at watching the highlights and saw that Aston Martin was a little bit further down the order than I had expected. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, we got Stroll in 9th and Alonso in 6th. So behind both Ferraris, behind one Mercedes, and then like Stroll was behind Norris and Tsunoda. So, and I don't know if it was because of a lack of pace, because you see the straight line speed is still really good for Aston Martin. They're like better than Red Bull, if I'm reading that correctly. So I don't know, maybe they just didn't deliver, but we'll see if they can get it back in the race.
Yeah, I'm not worried too much about Aston Martin because it's Azerbaijan 1, and 2, it's a sprint weekend as well, with like different practice sessions and a lot of different data, a lot of different variables. So, yeah, I'm not too worried that they're not necessarily on the pace of Mercedes or Ferrari at the moment.
Yeah. Ferrari looks better. Obviously Leclerc got pole, and then was Sainz ahead of Perez? No. But I think he had a bad last lap, so they definitely look, maybe they can fight for a little bit, but that usually doesn't age well when I say that. Looking at I guess the sprint thing is an opportunity for some teams to get points, I guess. I don't really understand this thing. But I guess looking ahead to the race, I think it'll be just how long can Leclerc keep it ahead of Verstappen, and will Verstappen continue to play it safe with knowing that he has a car to win and not try and force anything, because forcing something on this track could end very poorly. So we'll see.
I honestly don't think that was the lead for long. Red Bull's race pace looks very strong. Actually, when compared to Ferrari, that is, they've been very strong. So I'm not too worried about Verstappen, and I think he'll play by lap 30 or something. I'd be willing to bet on that, but it's Azerbaijan, and who knows what can happen.
All right, y'all want to go through real quick and just give a podium prediction, and then a sneaky points prediction or something like that?
Yeah, I'll start it off.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a pretty exciting race, but not exciting enough to bump both the Red Bulls off the podium. I guess unless one of them makes a huge mistake. And I do not think that Leclerc is going to hold that spot till the end of the race. I think that both of the Red Bulls being behind him kind of puts him at a major disadvantage, and I don't think Sainz is going to be able to pass them either, especially with what kind of car they have. So I'm going to go with a Red Bull 1-2. I'll give... Actually, I'll go Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez. I'll put Leclerc in P2, and then I'm hoping that McLaren can get another double point finish, but with how much carnage happens in that midfield, if they can both make it to the end of the race, I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of them could get points. But that also brings it back to what Kenji was saying about how their car setup was kind of aimed towards qualifying. But I'll say that McLaren can get in the points. I'll say Norris can probably sneak in like a P8 or P9 finish.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Perez will win this race if if there's no team orders, I think he'll get ahead on strategy or something. And he's shown really, I think he won this race after the Hamilton incident back in 2021. I think he's always been pretty solid at this track. So I'll say Checo wins, kind of maybe via luck if they don't make him give up first place. But Verstappen will be second, and then I'll throw Leclerc third if the Aston Martins look a little bit too far back, and I don't know. I just don't see Hamilton really fighting with anyone. So and then I'll say Bottas gets points from 14th. He did really good at Australia. I think he got all the way up to 11th after starting towards the back. And I think he got a podium here in a Williams once upon a time. So that's my predictions.
I think that Charlie, you brought up a good point about Perez and Azerbaijan. I mean, we know how good he can be on these like street circuits, especially last year when he won at Monaco. So he definitely has the pace on these street circuits, and I think he'll make a good bid for the win. But with that said, I think that Verstappen still has the best shot of winning this one, barring any like unforeseen things, which maybe isn't the right thing, the right assumption to make. I think that Verstappen will still take this one. But Perez, I think he'll be very close, and probably will take second. Again, if everything goes as expected. And for third, I think I'd go with Hamilton. And the reason why is because we know how Ferrari screws up. So I'm just going to bet on that. I think that's one of the certainties in Formula One. It's just for Ferrari to screw up everything that they're involved in. And with Mercedes, I think that they can, they have the experience and they have the ability to deal with the variable conditions that we have here at Baku this weekend. So Hamilton, I'm going to have him round out my podium. For the sneaky points finisher, I think I'll take Albon. And I know we touched on this earlier, but he's had a very strong string of performances to start the season. And I think he's going to extend it here in Baku. I really do. So, yeah, that's my prediction.
Alrighty. I think if y'all don't have any other closing remarks, we can end it right there. Y'all got anything else to say?
No, I think we've touched on everything. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, praying for the safety car.
Yeah. Hopefully there aren't like any major crashes, but enough kind of carnage that it's an exciting race and maybe someone can put on a good performance. But anyway, well, thank y'all for listening to episode 3 of Inside the Paddock. Next week we will go over the Azerbaijan Grand Prix after it has happened.
You got it.
And then I think, what's the next race on the calendar? I'm forgetting.
It's Monaco, maybe.
Is it Monaco? Okay. That should also be hopefully an interesting one, but in past years it's been rather boring. But anyway, signing out, and thank y'all for listening.